Look at your hand. The 5 fingers, the opposable thumb, the thin skin over the knuckles. This is the hand of a creature shaped by 1,000,000 years of running, throwing, gripping, fighting to survive. Now imagine a hand 1,000,000 years from the future. And here's the unsettling part. The most credible scientific guess isn't that it'll be stronger or sharper or more powerful. It might be weaker, softer. The hand of something that never had to fight for anything again. Because we have done something no species in the history of life on Earth has ever done. We switched off the very force that built us. And nobody fully knows what climbs into the driver's seat next. Today we're going to do something that sounds like science fiction, but is built almost entirely on real biology. We're going to look at the human being of the far future. Not next century, 1,000,000 years out. And I'm going to walk you through it in 3 stages, each stranger than the last. First, what evolution alone would do to our bodies if we just left it running. Then, the twist that changes everything. The reason the old rules may no longer apply to us at all. And finally, the possibility that the creature 1,000,000 years from now might not be made of flesh in any way you'd recognize. Stay with me to the end, because the last stage genuinely calls into question what the word human even means. But to see where we're going, we have to understand the engine that brought us here. For nearly 4 billion years, every living thing has been carved by one ruthless rule: natural selection. The mechanism Charles Darwin laid out back in 1859. It's brutally simple. You're born a little different from your parents, a random tweak in your genes. If that difference helps you survive, it gets passed on. If it doesn't, it dies with you. Repeat for 1 billion years, and that blind, patient process builds eyes, wings, brains. It built you. The key thing to understand is that natural selection has no goal and no kindness. It doesn't care if you're happy. That's the whole engine. Remember that, because in a moment, we're going to watch that engine do something it has never done before in the entire history of life. Start to stall. So let's begin with stage 1. Suppose evolution just kept running on us the old-fashioned way for the next 1,000,000 years. What would it sculpt? To predict the future, scientists do something clever. They look backward. They take the trends of the last 6 million years and the last 10,000, and they project them forward. Nick Longrich, a paleontologist at the University of Bath, has done exactly this kind of forecasting. And the picture that comes out is not the muscular, big-brained superhuman from the movie posters. It's something far more surprising. For one, we'd probably get taller and more lightly built. That trend is already visible. We'd likely live longer, as selection favors genes that keep us healthy deeper into life. And here's a strange one. Many scientists think we'd become friendlier, less aggressive, more cooperative. There's a concept called self-domestication, an idea developed in detail by Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Look at what happened when humans tamed wolves into dogs, or wild cattle into farm cattle. Domesticated animals consistently become gentler, more childlike in the face, more tolerant of crowding, and, remarkably, their brains shrink. We may have been doing this to ourselves for tens of thousands of years. As we packed into villages and then cities, the survivors weren't the strongest or the most violent. They were the ones who could get along, cooperate, live shoulder to shoulder with strangers without killing each other. We bred ourselves for friendliness, the same way we bred dogs. That same biologist, Longrich, paints a memorable and slightly unflattering portrait of where this leads. He suggests we may be heading toward becoming beautiful but bland. The human equivalent, in his words, of a golden retriever. Attractive, friendly, agreeable, and just maybe not that bright. And he's pointing at something real and genuinely weird, which brings us to one of the most provocative facts in all of human biology. Hold on to this, because it flips everything you assume about evolution being a march toward better. Your brain is shrinking. Not yours personally, our species. Over roughly the last 20,000 years, the human brain case has shrunk by something on the order of 10%. That's a chunk of brain, gone. We are walking around today with smaller brains than our Ice Age ancestors. Now, I have to be honest and careful here, because this is genuinely contested. Scientists argue fiercely about it. Some say it's just because our bodies got a bit smaller too. Ian Tattersall, a paleoanthropologist at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, offers a more optimistic read, that we simply got more efficient. That the invention of language let the brain reorganize and do more with less. So a smaller brain isn't a dumber one, just a leaner one. Others, more darkly, tie it to self-domestication, the same gentling that shrank the brains of every animal we ever tamed. A team led by Jeremy De Silva at Dartmouth College even published a study arguing the shrinkage happened shockingly recently, within the last 3,000 years. Though other researchers, like Brian Vilmore at the University of Nevada, fired back that the shrinking may not have happened at all. Nobody has the final answer. But the very fact that it's on the table should rattle you. Because it means evolution is absolutely not a straight line upward toward bigger and smarter. It goes wherever survival pushes it. And in a comfortable world, smarter may simply not be what survival rewards anymore. Which lands us, finally, on the twist. The thing that makes predicting the human of the future almost impossible, and far more interesting than any other animal's future. Here it is. For every other species on Earth, natural selection still rules with an iron fist. The slow gazelle gets eaten, the weak gene dies out. But for us, we broke the engine. Think about what civilization actually did. Medicine lets people survive illnesses that would once have ended their bloodline. Glasses fix eyes that natural selection would have ruthlessly weeded out. Warm homes, abundant food, clean water, surgery, antibiotics. We built a padded world where the old life or death filter barely applies anymore. In the harsh logic of the old engine, more and more of us now survive who in any previous era simply wouldn't have. And to be clear, this is one of the most beautiful things our species has ever achieved. It's compassion made real. But from evolution's cold, mechanical standpoint, it means the ruthless sorting that shaped us for 4 billion years has gone quiet. The pressure that pushed has eased off the wheel. But, and this is crucial, evolution doesn't stop. It just changes its boss. With nature's harsh filters softened, a different force takes the wheel. Scientists call this sexual selection, a force Darwin himself singled out as separate from ordinary survival. And in a comfortable world, it becomes one of the loudest voices left. We pick mates based on what we find attractive. And over thousands of generations, that preference sculpts the species. So future humans might drift toward whatever each era finds beautiful. Some scientists even suggest we could become more uniform-looking as global culture pushes the whole planet toward shared ideals of beauty, and as populations that were once isolated continue to blend together over the millennia. The face of the deep future might be a kind of average of all of us, and at the same time, the differences we find attractive between the sexes could get exaggerated. The engine's still running, it's just being steered by desire now instead of death. And if that were the end of the story, we could stop here with a tidy answer. In a million years, a taller, gentler, prettier, possibly smaller-brained cousin of ours. But it's not the end of the story, because there's a second new force entering the picture, and it's moving 1,000 times faster than biology ever could. For the first time in the history of life, a species has learned to read and rewrite its own source code. We're going to talk about that next, and it's where the whole picture cracks wide open. Here's the thing that makes the human future unlike any other. We're no longer just subject to evolution. We're starting to author it. There's a tool called CRISPR, developed into a gene editing system by Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuelle Charpentier, work that won them the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2020. Think of it as molecular scissors. that can find one specific sentence in the 3 billion-letter book of your DNA and edit it. Cut out a faulty gene, paste in a better one. We already use it to chase down inherited diseases, but run the clock forward a few centuries, let alone a million years, and the implication is staggering. The traits that took natural selection 100,000 years to shift, a future society might change deliberately in a single generation. Resistance to disease, the pace of aging, maybe height, maybe memory, maybe things we can't yet name. Evolution, for all of history, was something that happened to life. We may be the first species it starts happening by. Now, I want to be careful not to oversell this, because the experts who actually work in this field are quick to throw cold water on the Hollywood version. There's no single intelligence gene to flip. Most of the traits we care about, intelligence, personality, talent, emerge from thousands of genes tangled together with environment, upbringing, luck. You can't just dial them up like sliders, and there are deep, thorny ethical fights ahead about whether we even should. Fights that turned from theory into reality in 2018, when the Chinese scientist He Jiankui announced he'd edited the genes of twin girls, was widely condemned by the scientific community, and ended up in prison for it. The point isn't that we'll have designer superhumans next Tuesday. The point is, the steering wheel of evolution is slowly, unmistakably passing into our own hands. And once a species can choose its own traits, the slow, blind lottery of natural selection stops being the main story. Choice becomes the main story. And choice can go in directions nature never would. There's a second branch of this future too, one that doesn't change our genes at all, but our hardware. Already there are devices that can connect a human brain directly to a computer. Companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink, among others, have implanted chips that let a paralyzed person move a cursor with a thought. It's primitive today, but extend that line a million years? If we slowly fuse with our technology, memory you can expand, senses you can add, minds that can link to machines, then the being of the far future might be part biological, part engineered. Not a robot, not quite an animal, something in between, something we don't have a word for yet. And there's one more branch, the strangest of all, that some serious thinkers genuinely entertain, that the truest descendants of humanity might eventually not be made of flesh at all. The futurist Ray Kurzweil, now a director of engineering at Google, has spent decades arguing we'll eventually learn to move a mind onto a different substrate entirely, to live, in some form, inside the network. I want to flag this honestly. That idea sits much closer to speculation than to established science. We don't know if a mind can even exist apart from a living brain. But over a million-year horizon, the people who study this refuse to rule it out. And that alone tells you how wide the future has become. So let's pull these threads together, because the shape of the answer is finally visible, and it's not a single answer at all. There's a real possibility the human of a million years from now isn't one species, but many. Picture it. Some of our descendants might still be here on Earth, gently shaped by sexual selection into that taller, friendlier form. Others, off on Mars or further, reshaped by low gravity into something lankier, with larger eyes adapted to dimmer, distant light. Separated from Earth's population long enough that they drift into entirely separate species, the way isolated populations always have throughout the history of life. Others still might be deeply merged with technology, editing their own genome at will, their bodies a deliberate choice rather than an accident of birth. The thing that defined every species before us, a single shared path forced by a single shared environment, may simply shatter for us into a fan of possibilities. We could become the first creature in Earth's history to evolve in a dozen directions at once, on purpose. And maybe that's the real revelation hiding inside this whole question. We instinctively imagine the human of the future as an upgrade, a sleeker, smarter, stronger version of what we are. But evolution was never about upgrades. It was about fit, about matching whatever world you happen to be in. For 4 billion years, that world was wild and merciless, and it made us tough. Now, we've built a world that's gentle, abundant, and increasingly under our own control. And so the human of the deep future won't be shaped by the savanna or the ice. It'll be shaped by us, by what we value, what we find beautiful, what we choose to keep, and what we choose to edit away. For the first time, a species is holding the chisel that's carving its own descendants. And that's a power so new that nature itself has no rulebook for it. So here's the question I genuinely can't stop turning over, and I want yours. If we now hold the tools to design what comes after us, gentler or sharper, uniform or wildly diverse, flesh or something more, then the human of 1 million years from now won't really be a product of nature. It'll be a reflection of what we, right now, decide is worth becoming. So what would you keep? The strength we earned in the wild? The brain we may already be losing? Or something we haven't even imagined yet? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and the best answers always come from you.